Welcome to Office Revenge Hub. Relax and enjoy today's story.
They lied to fire me. They fabricated evidence, falsified reports, and destroyed my reputation. But I had proof, and that proof destroyed them in ways they never saw coming. My name is Jordan Hayes, and for 11 years I worked as the operations director at Crestview Manufacturing, a mid-sized industrial equipment company in the Midwest. When I say I was operations director, I mean I ran the entire production floor, 3 shifts, 240 employees, $12 million in monthly output. Every piece of equipment that left our facility went through systems I'd built and processes I'd optimized. I started at Crestview in 2011 as a production supervisor. I was 26 years old, fresh out of an industrial engineering program, eager to prove myself. The company made specialized conveyor systems and material handling equipment for warehouses and distribution centers. Not glamorous work, but essential. And I loved it. The company culture was blue-collar and straightforward. Most of the leadership had worked their way up from the floor. They valued hard work, practical solutions, and loyalty. The CEO, a man named Frank Morrison, had started as a welder 40 years earlier and built Crestview from a small job shop into a regional manufacturing powerhouse. I fit right in. I wasn't afraid to get my hands dirty. I'd work alongside the welders and fabricators. I'd troubleshoot equipment failures at 2 a.m. I'd cover shifts when we were short-staffed. I earned respect by being competent and reliable. By year 3, I was promoted to production manager. By year 6, I was operations manager. By year 9, operations director. Each promotion came with more responsibility, longer hours, and the satisfaction of knowing I was building something that mattered. I implemented lean manufacturing principles that reduced waste by 30%. I redesigned our production flow to increase throughput by 22%. I built training programs that reduced our injury rate to nearly zero. I saved the company millions of dollars while improving quality and employee satisfaction. The executive team trusted me completely. Frank would tell people I was the best operational hire he'd ever made, that I'd be running the company someday. I believed him. The problems started when Frank retired. He was 72, wanted to spend time with his grandchildren, wanted to step back from the daily grind. While the board promoted his son-in-law to CEO, a guy named Derek Carlson. Derek had married Frank's daughter 15 years earlier. He'd worked in sales at Crestview for about 10 years, then moved into a VP of business development role. He was charismatic, good at client relationships, comfortable in boardrooms, but he didn't understand manufacturing. He didn't understand operations, and he definitely didn't understand the culture that made Crestview successful. Derek brought in his own people almost immediately, a new CFO from his previous company, a new head of sales, a new VP of human resources, all of them outsiders, all of them corporate types who'd never worked in manufacturing. The culture started changing, policies became more rigid, processes became more bureaucratic. The leadership team that had built Crestview started leaving or being pushed out. Within a year, half the executive team was gone, but I stayed. I figured I was safe. I was running operations. We were hitting our numbers. Clients were happy. Employees were productive. What reason would Derek have to mess with success? I underestimated how threatened he felt by people who knew more than him. About 18 months after Derek took over, he hired a consulting firm called Pinnacle Performance Group. They specialized in operational efficiency for manufacturing companies. Their pitch was that they could identify inefficiencies and optimization opportunities that internal teams couldn't see because they were too close to the operation. I thought it was a waste of money. We'd already implemented lean manufacturing. We were already running efficiently, but Derek insisted. He wanted fresh eyes. He wanted to prove he could improve on what Frank had built. The Pinnacle team showed up and started conducting interviews, observing the production floor, analyzing our data. They were there for 6 weeks. I cooperated fully. I gave them access to everything. I explained our processes, our reasoning, our history. I figured transparency was the best approach. The lead consultant was a woman named Stephanie Vance. She was in her 40s, had an MBA from a prestigious school, spoke in management jargon. She'd ask me questions that showed she didn't understand manufacturing. She'd suggest changes that would actually reduce efficiency. I'd explain why those approaches wouldn't work in our specific context. She didn't like being corrected, I could tell, but I wasn't being arrogant, I was being accurate. And I assumed her job was to find the truth, not to be right. I was wrong about that too. Pinnacle delivered their final report to Derek and the board. I wasn't invited to the presentation. That should have been my first warning sign. When they presented their findings to me later, I understood why I'd been excluded. According to their report, Crestview's operations were severely mismanaged, processes were inefficient, resources were being wasted, safety protocols were inadequate, quality control was inconsistent, and all of this was due to poor leadership and resistance to change at the operations director level. Me. The report claimed I'd implemented outdated methodologies, that I'd resisted modernization, that I'd created a culture of complacency on the production floor, but that employees were afraid to report problems because I retaliated against people who questioned my decisions. None of it was true, not one word. I read through the report in disbelief. They'd taken data out of context. They'd misrepresented conversations. They'd made recommendations that directly contradicted manufacturing best practices. And they'd blamed me for problems that didn't exist. I scheduled a meeting with Derek to address the report. I brought documentation, performance metrics, safety records, quality data, employee satisfaction surveys, everything that proved the report was wrong. Derek listened for about 5 minutes, then he cut me off. Jordan, I appreciate your perspective, but Pinnacle is one of the most respected consulting firms in the industry. They've analyzed hundreds of manufacturing operations. I have to trust their expertise. Derek, their report is factually incorrect. They've misrepresented our processes and fabricated issues. I can show you point by point where they're wrong. Or you're too defensive to accept legitimate criticism. This isn't criticism, this is fiction. They're claiming we have safety problems when we haven't had a recordable injury in 18 months. They're claiming quality issues when our defect rate is 0.3%. They're making things up. Why would they make things up? They have no incentive to lie. They have every incentive to justify their fees by finding problems, even if they have to invent them. Derek's expression hardened. I think you're being paranoid. And honestly, this kind of defensiveness is exactly what the report identified. Inability to accept feedback. So resistance to change. I'm not resisting change. I'm resisting lies. Jordan, here's what's going to happen. We're going to implement Pinnacle's recommendations. You're going to cooperate with that process. If you can't do that professionally, we'll need to discuss whether this is still the right role for you. I left that meeting knowing I was in serious trouble. Derek had decided to trust outside consultants over his own operations director. And anything I said to defend myself would be framed as defensiveness and resistance. Over the next 2 months, I watched Derek implement Pinnacle's recommendations. Changes that made no operational sense, processes that slowed production, policies that frustrated employees. I documented everything. I showed Derek the negative impacts, the declining metrics, the rising costs. He blamed me for poor implementation, for not supporting the changes, for undermining the new processes. I couldn't win. If the changes worked, Pinnacle got credit. If they failed, I got blamed. Then things got worse. Derek brought in someone from Pinnacle to work as a consultant embedded in our operations. Stephanie Vance herself. She was going to help manage the transition to the new processes. She'd be working alongside me, observing, reporting back to Derek. I was being supervised by the person who'd written the report attacking me. Stephanie started holding meetings with my direct reports without inviting me. She'd make decisions about production scheduling without consulting me. She'd override my instructions to the floor supervisors. She was systematically undermining my authority while documenting every interaction. I complained to Derek. He told me I needed to be more collaborative, more open to external perspectives. 4 months after the Pinnacle report, Derek called me into his office. HR was there. The new CFO was there. Stephanie was on speakerphone. Derek had a folder in front of him. He looked uncomfortable but determined. Jordan, we need to have a difficult conversation. Over the past several months, we've documented ongoing performance issues, failure to implement directives, resistance to organizational changes, creating a hostile work environment for consultants trying to help improve operations. That's not accurate. I've implemented every change you've asked for. I've cooperated with Stephanie despite her having no manufacturing experience. What you're calling resistance is me pointing out when changes are harming our operations. We have documentation that tells a different story. He opened the folder. Inside were printed emails, incident reports, performance reviews. I'd never seen any of them before. These are fabricated, I said immediately. These are official company documents, signed reports from supervisors, email chains showing your refusal to cooperate. I never received those emails. Those aren't my responses. Are you claiming we forged your emails? I'm saying I've never seen these before. Let me see the metadata. Let me see the original files. Jordan, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Instead of taking accountability, you're making conspiracy theories. Derek, this is my career, my reputation. If you're going to fire me based on documents I've never seen, I deserve to examine them. The HR director, a woman named Patricia Chen, spoke up. Mr. Hayes, we've conducted a thorough investigation. Multiple witnesses have corroborated issues with your performance and conduct. This isn't about one report. It's a pattern of behavior. What witnesses? I want to speak to them directly. That's not how this works. We're terminating your employment effective immediately. You'll receive 2 weeks severance. We'll need your badge and company laptop. I sat there in shock. 11 years of dedication, results, and loyalty. And I was being fired based on documents I'd never seen, by people who didn't understand the work I did. This is wrongful termination. I'll be speaking to a lawyer. Derek stood up. That's your right. Now, but I'd caution you that fighting this will only damage your reputation further. We're offering a neutral reference if you leave quietly. If you make this adversarial, we'll be forced to share the documentation of your performance issues with future employers. It was a threat. Accept the firing quietly or they'd blacklist me in the industry. I walked out of that office in a daze. I cleaned out my desk while a security guard watched. 11 years of work reduced to a cardboard box. People I'd worked with for years avoided eye contact. They'd been told I was being let go for performance issues. They didn't know the truth. I drove home and sat in my car in the driveway for an hour. I couldn't process what had just happened. I'd been set up, framed, pushed out by people who'd lied about my work and fabricated evidence to justify it. And the first few weeks after being fired were the darkest period of my life. I filed for unemployment. I started applying for operations jobs at other manufacturing companies, and I got rejection after rejection. Word had spread in the industry. Crestview was telling people I'd been terminated for cause. for performance issues and inability to work with others. No one would hire someone with that reputation. My savings started draining. I had a mortgage, car payments, bills. I'd been making good money as operations director. Now I had nothing coming in except unemployment. The financial stress was crushing. But worse was the emotional toll. My entire identity had been built around being good at my job, being the person who solved problems and delivered results. Now I was jobless, unemployable, with a destroyed reputation. I stopped sleeping. I'd lie awake replaying that meeting with Derek, thinking about the fabricated documents, wondering how they'd done it, whether I could have prevented it. I started having panic attacks, random moments where I couldn't breathe, where my heart raced, where I felt overwhelming dread about my future. I withdrew from everyone. I stopped answering calls from former colleagues. I stopped seeing friends. I just stayed home, applied for jobs, got rejected, and sank deeper into despair. This went on for about 2 months. Then I got an email that changed everything. It was from a production supervisor at Crestview named Marcus Williams. Marcus had worked under me for 6 years. He was one of the best supervisors I'd ever worked with. Smart, dedicated, great with people. The email was short. Jordan, I know what they did to you was wrong. I have information you need to see. Can we meet somewhere private? I met Marcus at a coffee shop 40 minutes outside of town. He looked nervous. He kept checking over his shoulder like he expected to be followed. Marcus, what's going on? He pulled out a USB drive. I shouldn't be doing this. If they find out, I'll lose my job. But what they did to you was criminal. I can't stay silent. What's on the drive? Emails, real emails, between Derek, Stephanie, and Patricia, planning how to get rid of you, discussing what false claims they could make, instructions on how to fabricate documentation. My hands were shaking as I took the drive. How did you get these? Stephanie was sloppy. She'd leave her laptop unlocked when she was on the floor. I saw one of the email chains by accident. Then I started paying attention. I copied what I could before they locked everything down. Marcus, this is evidence of fraud, of wrongful termination. Why would they do this? From what I read, Derek wanted to bring in his own operations person, someone loyal to him, but he couldn't fire you without cause, not with your track record. So they manufactured cause. Pinnacle's report was the setup. The fake documentation was the execution. I felt rage building, pure, focused rage. Who knows about this? Just me. I haven't told anyone. I wanted you to have it first. Thank you. Seriously, this could save my career. Save it? Jordan, this could destroy them. Use it. I went home and spent the next 12 hours going through every file on that USB drive. There were over 200 emails. Then they told the complete story of a conspiracy to force me out. 3 weeks after Derek became CEO, he'd emailed Stephanie at Pinnacle. He wanted to hire her firm to evaluate operations, but he made it clear he wanted the report to identify serious problems with current leadership. He suggested areas to focus on. He asked for recommendations that would justify replacing the operations director. Stephanie replied, confirming she understood the real objective. She'd deliver a report that would support the changes Derek wanted to make. The Pinnacle investigation wasn't an investigation at all. It was a hit job. Stephanie had written most of the report before ever visiting our facility. She'd cherry-picked data, she'd misrepresented conversations, she'd invented problems. Then there were emails between Derek and Patricia planning the termination. They discussed what claims would be legally defensible. They talked about creating documentation that would support their narrative. They strategized about how to intimidate me into not fighting back. Patricia had instructed supervisors to write false incident reports. She'd drafted emails and told people to send them from their accounts to create a paper trail. She'd fabricated performance reviews that I'd never actually received. It was all there, every lie, every manipulation, every fraudulent document. And they'd been stupid enough to discuss it all via company email. I had them. I called an employment lawyer the next morning. Her name was Rebecca Torres. I'd found her through online reviews. She specialized in wrongful termination and whistleblower cases. I met with Rebecca and showed her everything. The fabricated termination documents, the real emails from Marcus's USB drive, the timeline of how they'd orchestrated my firing. Rebecca read through everything carefully. Then she looked up at me. "Jordan, this is one of the clearest cases of wrongful termination I've ever seen. They didn't just fire you unjustly. They committed fraud. They manufactured evidence. They conspired to destroy your reputation. This isn't just a civil case. This could be criminal." "What do? We file a wrongful termination lawsuit. We sue Derek personally, Crestview as a company, Pinnacle Performance Group, and Stephanie Vance. We seek damages for lost wages, emotional distress, and punitive damages for fraud. And we make the emails public record as part of the filing. Will we win?" "Win? Jordan, they're going to settle. They have to. If this goes to trial, these emails become public. Their fraud becomes public record. Derek loses his job. Pinnacle loses their reputation. They'll pay whatever it takes to make this go away quietly." "I don't want quiet. I want them to face consequences." Rebecca smiled. "Then we make settling very expensive, and we make sure the truth comes out." We filed the lawsuit 3 weeks later. The complaint was detailed and damning. We included excerpts from the emails as exhibits. We outlined the entire conspiracy. We named every person involved. The filing became public record immediately. Within 24 hours, local business press had picked up the story. "Just manufacturing executive claims fraud in termination," was the headline. The article included quotes from the emails. Derek's attorney called Rebecca within 48 hours asking to discuss settlement. Rebecca told them we'd consider offers, but that we were prepared to go to trial. Then things escalated beyond what I'd anticipated. The story got picked up by a national business publication. A journalist started investigating Pinnacle Performance Group. She found that Crestview wasn't the only company where Pinnacle had delivered questionable reports. There was a pattern. Companies would hire Pinnacle. Pinnacle would identify problems with existing leadership. Companies would fire those leaders and hire Pinnacle consultants to fix the problems. It was a business model. Create problems, sell solutions, could replace competent people with consultants who'd bill indefinitely. The journalist published a major exposé. How consulting firm Pinnacle Performance Group profits from manufacturing problems. It detailed Crestview and 4 other companies where the same pattern had occurred. Pinnacle's reputation collapsed overnight. Clients started cancelling contracts. Lawsuits started piling up from other people who'd been fired after Pinnacle reports. The firm's partners were facing potential fraud charges. Stephanie Vance was fired. She'd lose her consulting license. She'd probably face civil suits from multiple plaintiffs. Meanwhile, Crestview was dealing with its own crisis. The board had launched an internal investigation after my lawsuit. They discovered Derek had spent over $300,000 on Pinnacle's consulting fees, money that had been wasted on a manufactured problem. They also discovered that the operational changes Derek had implemented based on Pinnacle's recommendations had reduced efficiency by 18%. Production was down, costs were up, quality issues were emerging, client complaints were increasing, everything I'd warned about was happening. But now Derek couldn't blame me, I was gone, and the problems were getting worse. 6 weeks after we filed the lawsuit, Derek was placed on administrative leave. The board was investigating whether to terminate him for cause. His relationship with Frank Morrison's daughter was reportedly strained. Turns out destroying a company your father-in-law built doesn't win family points. 2 months after filing, Crestview's attorneys made a settlement offer, $2.4 million, a full reinstatement of my position if I wanted it. A public statement acknowledging that my termination was unjust, and most importantly, no non-disclosure agreement. I could talk about what happened. Rebecca advised me to counter. We asked for $3.2 million, a public apology from Derek personally, and a guarantee that Derek would be terminated if the settlement was accepted. They agreed to everything, $3.2 million, Derek's resignation, a public statement from Crestview's board acknowledging that I'd been wrongfully terminated based on false information, and my reputation fully restored. I didn't take the reinstatement. I didn't want to work for Crestview again. Too much had happened, but other companies had been watching the case. I had 5 job offers within a week of the settlement announcement. I accepted a position as VP of Operations at a larger manufacturing company in a different state. Better title, better pay, better everything. They'd followed the lawsuit. They knew I'd been right. They wanted someone with integrity who'd fight for what was correct. The settlement money changed my life. I paid off my mortgage. I invested most of it. I donated some to manufacturing trade schools, and I kept enough to feel secure for the first time in years. But the real victory wasn't the money. It was watching the people who'd lied about me face consequences. Derek was forced to resign. He tried to find another CEO position, but his reputation was destroyed. No board would hire someone who'd been ousted for fraud and poor judgment. Patricia Chen, the HR director, who'd helped fabricate documentation, was fired and faced potential criminal charges for fraud. Her HR career was over. Pinnacle Performance Group filed for bankruptcy within a year. The lawsuits and cancelled contracts destroyed them. A company built on lying to clients couldn't survive once the truth came out. Stephanie Vance never worked as a consultant again. She'd become the face of fraudulent consulting. No firm would touch her, and Crestview, they brought back some of the old leadership team. They reversed most of Derek's changes. They spent 2 years rebuilding what he'd damaged. They survived, but barely. All because they'd lied to fire one person who'd been telling the truth. I saw Marcus Williams a few months after the settlement. He'd been promoted to operations manager at Crestview. They recognized his value once they cleaned house. "Nah, I heard you got a good settlement," he said. "I did, and none of it would have happened without you. You risked your job to get me that evidence. You deserved the truth. They were destroying a good person for no reason. I couldn't watch that happen." "Why did you do it? Really?" He thought for a moment. "Because I've worked in manufacturing for 20 years. Nah, I've seen good leaders and bad leaders. You were one of the good ones. You cared about the work. You cared about the people. And watching them lie about you to justify replacing you with someone incompetent, that wasn't right. Someone had to stand up for what was right." That's the thing about truth. It doesn't care about politics or power or corporate hierarchies. It just exists. And when people try to bury it, eventually someone with integrity will dig it up. Derek and his conspirators thought they could fabricate reality, create false documentation, control the narrative, make their lies become truth through repetition and authority. But they made one critical mistake. They put their lies in writing. They documented their fraud, and they assumed no one would have the courage to expose it. They were wrong. The proof I had didn't just clear my name, it destroyed the people who tried to destroy me, not through revenge or spite, but through simple truth. I didn't have to make anything up. I didn't have to exaggerate. I just had to show what they'd actually done, and that was enough. Today, I run operations for a company that values honesty and competence. I've rebuilt my career stronger than it was before. I've built a reputation as someone who stands up for what's right, even when it's costly. And I sleep well at night, knowing I didn't compromise my integrity to make things easier. The people who lied to fire me, they're gone, discredited, facing consequences that will follow them for years. That's not revenge. That's just what happens when lies meet truth. Truth always wins. Sometimes it takes time, sometimes it takes courage, sometimes it takes someone like Marcus, willing to risk something to do the right thing, but truth always wins. If you've ever been betrayed at work, you're not alone. Where are you watching from right now? Drop it in the comments. Subscribe to Office Revenge Hub for more powerful workplace revenge stories.